My talk today is for the English specialization students of the University of Distance Education. The module number is Eng-4112, Translation and Interpretation 4. Here, I am dealing with Chapter 8, Humour, and Chapter 9, Latinisms. You can follow with your textbook. Let me begin with Chapter 8, Humour. Chapter 8, Humour. Humour is difficult to translate and even more difficult to interpret. For a simultaneous interpreter to draw a laugh from the audience at the same time that those hearing the original joke burst into laughter is a rare feat. An interpreter must be attentive to the purpose of the humour. Many speakers will begin a speech on a humorous note to be clever or simply to establish rapport with the audience. For example, a British ambassador acting as president of the United Nations Security Council once began a meeting with a limerick dedicated to the Russian ambassador, while the other members had weathered a bitter New York snowstorm. Sergei is a difficult name to slip in the limerick game, but we have to admit that he looks so fit that he puts the whole council to shame. It is difficult for interpreters to render a complex verse form into Spanish, French, Arabic, etc., while preserving the humor. In such cases, it's helpful but not indispensable for the joke to be accurately translated. The joke is merely an opening gambit. On the other hand, jokes are sometimes used to convey a key point of the speech. In those cases, the message is more important than the humor. It is the content of the message, not the humorous sugarcoating, that the interpreter should strive to translate. Although the joke must sometimes be sacrificed to the message, it is of course preferable to preserve the humor whenever possible, since it can often be part of the message. Moreover, speakers sometimes use humor to revive a somnolent debate or to break the ice when a negotiation has come to a deadlock. In such situations, the humor is not accidental to the speaker's substantive intent. It is the speaker's intent. And an interpreter who fails to get across the humor has failed to get across the point. Let's see all two typical situations lost in translation. In his toast at a State Department luncheon, honoring President Yeltsin, Vice President Al Gore told a typically shaggy story about his job's lack of clout. When he had his left leg operated on recently, he said he was under general anesthesia for 90 minutes. During that time, he surrendered his constitutional prerogatives to the person next in the line of succession. When he came to, Mr. Gore reclaimed his powers, which, he said, restored Mr. Foley to his usual position of authority. The Americans in the room winked on the tails of vice presidential superfluousness, laughed. But when the story was translated, most of the Russians sat stone-faced. The defense secretary did the best he could to help. He told the Russian defense minister, "That's a joke. No laugh." Then he tried to explain. No laugh. Maybe the Russians were saving their senses of humor for their boss. A little later, Mr. Yeltsin noted with approval that the United States was relaxing its trade restriction linked to the immigration of Jews. Everyone in his country, he said, would be pleased. In Russia, even school children know who these people are, Jackson and Vanik. Finally, the Russians laughed. At the other extreme from jokes that fall flat in translation is the temptation some interpreters may feel to go rather too far in conveying the speaker's wit or charm. For instance, at a joint news conference given by Presidents Clinton and Yeltsin, the latter humorously chastised the journalists present for their predictions about the failure of the presidential talks. The interpreter rendered Mr. Yeltsin's remark as, "It's you who are a disaster." This was a bit too strong for Mr. Clinton's taste, and he immediately quipped to the press, "Be sure you get the attribution right." However, what Mr. Yeltsin actually said in Russian was simply, "It is you who fell through. That is, not the meeting that fell through." Which is not witty or funny, but certainly more charitable toward journalism than the excessive word disaster, and well short of causing Mr. Clinton any discomfort in his relations with the press. It would have been better if the interpreter stems from the fact that humor is in the eye of the beholder. The above episodes suggest part of the problem of translating humor sacri is funny in one language or culture is not necessarily funny in another. Another problem is that much humorous speech on repartee is amusing because it is quick and lively, and many jokes are funny mainly because of the split second in timing of the punchline. One of the most widely used types of humor in formal speeches is the deadpan or straight-faced sarcasm. This caustic form of humor thus is, so be not required as much finesse as irony. Apparently, it was even within the reach of the mad and notoriously unfunny Roman Empire Caligula, who is said to have been pleasant and cordial. One story quotes replied to a shoemaker who had the audacity to call him a psychopath to have run his face, "It's true, but my subjects are no better." Dry sarcasm was also a style for which Abraham Lincoln was famous. Once accused by a critic of cocktail being two-faced, he honestly replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, if I had two faces, would I be wearing this one?" Let me move on to the next chapter, Chapter 9, Latinism. Speakers, especially in formal statements and in some technical contexts, may use Latin expressions. It is therefore advisable for interpreters to know some Latin. But this is not always possible because mastering modern living languages is far more important to an interpreter. As a general rule, it is safe to repeat a Latin expression you hear when you are interpreting a speech. That is the best course when you do not know what a Latin expression means. Presumably, the intended audience will know what it means if you have heard it and repeated it accurately. It's important to understand that there are at least 3 different kinds of Latinisms. A. Assimilated Latinisms, which have become part of the standard lexicon in the language that has adopted them. B. Literary or scholarly phrases, maxims, quotations, etc., which are sometimes used as interspersed in a speech mainly for rhetorical effect. C. Latin expressions used as terms of art, which occur most often in the legal, medical, and scientific contexts. This classification also applies to foreign words and phrases borrowed from languages other than Latin. Notice that type A, the assimilated Latinism, does not have to be left in the Latin. It can be treated in much the same way as any other foreign language term or expression. If you know what it means, it may be better to translate it. To use a Latinism, even if it exists in the English lexicon, makes a simple statement sound odd and affected. It's probably for this reason that George Orwell urged writers never to use a Latin word when an English word would do. Type B, the literary Latinism, poses a different problem. A Latin phrase or quotation of this type is usually best left in Latin, since the intent of the speaker is to impress the audience with his erudition or that of the source he is quoting. Sometimes the speaker will spell out the meaning of the Latin quotation for the audience. In such case, you will have the opportunity to interpret the explanatory translation into the target language. But if the speaker does not do the audience that favor, you need not feel that it is your job as an interpreter to translate the Latin phrase. The speaker is assuming a certain level of learning in the audience, which you must respect. Or you may seem to be speaking down to the audience when the speaker is not. In interpreting a speech, you will not explain a Latin maxim to an audience of international lawyers any more than you will explain a Freudian term to an audience of psychoanalysts. Type C, the technical Latinism, poses yet a different problem. When used as a term of art, a Latin expression is being used in the same way as an English technical term like hydrocarbon or metal fatigue. It has a specific technical meaning, and sometimes there does not exist any word in the target language that will convey that precise meaning. In fact, in some technical contexts, the Latin term is the only practical choice for a multinational audience. The names of fish, for example, vary greatly from one country to another, even within the same language. So, the only way an international meeting of marine biologists or fisheries experts can be sure of understanding each other is to use the Latin term for the species of fish they are discussing. Similarly, astronomers use only Latin names for certain stars or galaxies. Here, your job as an interpreter, especially if the Latin term of art is unfamiliar to you, is simply to repeat it as accurately as you can. You can turn up the volume to your earphones if necessary so that you can hear the exact pronunciation. The worst problem with this typo Latinism is not to hear it right. Moreover, there is a potential for misleading some members of the audience for whom the Latin term is less familiar. Now we've come to the end of our talk. I hope you understand it. Thank you for your attention.